For those who haven't joined us previously, essentially London Tech Leaders is a growing platform for heads of transformation leaders, CXO kind of level, board level discussions. And it's an opportunity to discuss the latest industry trends in the market, challenge conventional thinking. But when we go back to kind of in-person events, it's a real opportunity to network with your peers, where you might not get to do so on a day-to-day basis.
Lolita asked an interesting question in this regard to employees and people working. COVID has brought about new unanticipated ways of working within the remote space, which I believe we might now consider as part of our long-term work policy package. So what do we think about that? If we're changing the way people are working, and it's been forced, as Des was saying, and we're now doing that, how should we be looking at people's packages, their compensation, how we support them in those remote working ways? How does that factor in? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
I mean, I can talk a little bit of that. I mean, I think it's interesting just talking to a few colleagues. I think our challenge at the start when we went into this, and people are creatures of habit. So when we first went into lockdown, people were, how can I work in lockdown? How do I do this? How do I remotely work? We've been doing this for 6 months now, roughly. And now people are back to, how do I not do this? How do I go back to work? How do I travel? How do I do those things? With experience, and I know we're not alone, people are asking to be paid to come into the office because people that are not in the office don't have to pay for their transport and travel and lunches. And for me, it's a strange mindset that says, yeah, but you've been paid for that and you've got the benefit for the last 6 months. And I think it's a case of careful what you wish for, because I think, if actually from an organisational point of view, on a personal level, I would definitely question the fact that somebody's compensation takes into account things like travelling to London. We used to have London waiting, for instance, in London. Like that went away and it got baked into people's in people's salaries. But that was a payment because of the cost of coming to London, the cost of London lunches were all higher. Well, if that goes away, why would I be looking to pay somebody more for working in London when I can pay them the same to go out? I think we're going to see quite a fundamental shift in displacement of staff. I think more organisations are going to be open to remote working. More people are going to be open to remote working. You have to look at really on the real estate side, where house prices in London are dropping and house prices on the outskirts of London, and I think Devon, Cornwall, and Dorset have seen the biggest rises because people are starting to say, I no longer need to live in the centre of London if I'm going to work 3 days a week outside of it. So I think we're definitely going to start to see the work population change. I don't know what that, I can't say I know what that's going to look like. I don't know if we'll continue to find that, young people particularly come to London for London. We happen to then use London because we get resource pools. And I think that's the other part, is where skills are going to lie. And we still get hot spots of skills, and why the roles still sit in London? Well, because there's certain skills that obviously are gravitated to London. So I think it's going to be an interesting period over the next year, 18 months. I do think we're going to see change. I'm not sure I've got the right crystal ball to work out exactly what it's going to look like, but I think people that flexibility needs to be on both sides, both with individuals and with companies.
Well, I think you've already answered Hamid's question, which was, if we're going to be in this world, then and working from home is the norm, where should we look for our talent? Right, and I think you just sort of said, well, we need to consider that. We need to think about it. I think that'll be an evolving question. But certainly, for myself, the headquarters of Naked Wines has always been in Norwich, up in Norfolk, and that in itself, that's where it grew out of, and that's where it was founded. It's always been very almost belligerently there, and saying this is where we are. And just in the last month, we've recruited 2 completely remote employees in the technical discipline, and everybody's going, oh, didn't know we could do that, and so I think that's really opening up that pool. But to your point about you haven't got your crystal ball, I think Steve in our audience thinks he might have. So he says, could it be more likely we'll no longer have team building and planning away days, but more in the office days? Are we seeing a whole reversal of this, and suddenly it's going to be like, right, everybody in the office, and that's it? Phil, you're nodding. Is that how you see it rolling?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more work from home and a lot more, 1 day or 2 days a week in the office. Social distancing aside, it's finding that space to come together as a team. But it's, I think, fundamentally we're going to see a shift. And if it's not a shift in terms of, corporate office costs, it's a shift in terms of lifestyle choices for people, efficiency, several hours of commuting on trains or motorways. Is that an effective use of time when you've got an agenda that says you could do most of that? You've proven how effective the team or the process can be working remotely. I think for me, from a technology point of view, where does the corporate boundary stop in a world where it's no longer bring your own device because nobody's bringing anything, they're staying put? Right, so if they're staying put on their home network, or that, how many people on this call as technology leaders have had a call about the corporate technology being poor and it's really slow today? And that's because you've got teenagers at home streaming Xbox games or whatever. Where does it stop now? Our boundaries will fundamentally shift from a technology point of view over the coming months and years, I think, as these new ways of working are adopted, and we change how we go about our business.
And I don't think it's just the technology, Phil. I think you're right, that will change. But Abid's stuck in a question here: is working from home sustainable for younger staff in shared accommodation, and has productivity suffered in your teams? Yeah, and I think we're going to see not just technology change, but I can almost see over time the housing market changing. Suddenly, if you've got a garage that can be converted to an office, your property is going to be more valuable, right? I can almost see that thing. Des and Neve and Phil are coyly hiding behind a nice screen, but I've seen behind there, they're all sitting in plush offices at home, guys, right? I'm sure some of our audience are as well, but we have to be cognizant. There will be a lot of people, generally younger than us, earlier in their careers than us, who are maybe in shared accommodation, balancing laptops at the, on the settee and stuff like that. We've got to think about those. They're the lifeblood of our organisation coming through. Jacob, how are we going to deal with those people? How are we going to help?
I agree, and I don't think the model is going to be the same for everybody. For the individual, as you've just described, I think there will be people who would prefer to come back to an office, but ultimately the question is around what does the company need from the individuals, and therefore what you've got to do is segment your population just to understand who needs to be in the office and whether on a full-time basis or not. And for those people who will have more flexibilities. So I don't see it as one size fits all. I see an element of segmenting the population within an organization to decide on the best model that needs to be adopted for the future. And I do see a scenario where people will stop traveling to get to the office to sit at a desk and do their work from a desk. I think it becomes much more about the whiteboarding question. I'll go to the office because I need to meet with some people and we'll have a whiteboarding exercise. So I think in the redesign of the office, if you like, of the new normal, it's going to be more around less desks, more meeting spaces, more meeting rooms, and the ability for people to come in to be able to co-create and to be working together. If I've got something to do, I will probably be more productive doing it from home. In my case, in some other people's cases, it might not be the most optimal thing for them. So I think we're going to see a combination of these things emerge, depending on the company's needs as well as the individuals. I don't necessarily see a world where it's all going to be one thing or another, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And Des, I know you want to talk about a point which I've also sort of thought of as I walk down our town's high street and see lots of these empty department stores and shops that are no longer there as the traditional high street slowly dies. I can't help thinking about work hubs. Tell us about your conversation about work hubs you've had recently, Des.
Yeah, we were talking about how, what is it that people need to come into the office for. And we were finding, to answer a question earlier about, a lot of our younger staff were struggling because of the type of accommodation that they're working in. And we got into a conversation about possibility of, could we set up local work hubs around London? I.e., are there sort of places around London that we could actually set up our own sort of remote space, not in a WeWorks type style. And I think, I think if you've been in the centre of London, WeWorks or that sort of industry, I think is probably going to struggle an awful lot because it's based on the premise of coming into town. But something similar in a concept of, and maybe this is something where the coffee shops start to see more business, and Costas or whoever around, I need to get out of my flat, or I need to get out of my room, and I want to go somewhere to base myself for the day, maybe for one day or maybe for more, but it needs to be local. I need to walk to it. I don't want to travel, and I need a sort of small business, like function. And I think that there's certainly something in it for us in that. We've been looking at could we potentially create sort of work hubs? Would they be shared? Could we create sort of ones for our employees, particularly, as I said, for those that haven't got a home setup that works, where they can sit at home and work easily, either through childcare or situations. We've got quite a few of our younger staff still live at home because of the cost of London. And they're working and living out of a bedroom all day, and they want to get out and socialise. And so so that's certainly something that we've been investigating. And I think maybe somebody sort of talked about what opportunities might pop out of this. That might be an opportunity there. And I think to your point, we might see a change in High Street because we might see more of those popping up.
Yeah, and Harvey said Whitbread used to have some work hub spaces alongside some of their travel inns years ago. They were good, usually just off motorways, so easy to get to. Thanks for that, Harvey.
David, I think Barclays were looking at using their high street chain of banks as those kind of hubs. I think each individual organisation has those opportunities if they have high street estates to create some of those things. I think it's not just the drop-in hubs. I think organisations will probably look at how they create their own hubs, and I think it's about that choice and flexibility.
Are you offering us all a little bit of space in a corner of a Costa there, Phil? Is that what you're offering up there now?
If you guys want to come into a Costa and buy some awesome coffee, you are more than welcome.
Okay, that's a good business model. I like it.